Okay, so hello everyone, good evening, and welcome to our session today. Okay, so welcome to our session today. Today's event is around the topic of working with systems innovation methods and tools. And I'm so happy to be doing this session because this is our second event of the SI Open Accelerator series of the second chapter that we are hosting this year. We have really used all the feedback from our past series and have built it so it is more easier for you to understand and get along with the series. So I am excited to go forward on this journey with all of you there. I am Asra. I am joining you all from Bonn in Germany, and we have Joss who is joining us from London. In the meantime, you can also just drop in the chat where you're joining us from, so it can facilitate, like I think, a global learning. And I hope you all have a snack with you. I just have some glass of milk so I can keep going to the end of the workshop because I know it's about 2 hours long and it's quite late in the evening. So you can also have your early dinner there. So if you're joining us for the first time in this event today, I would like to let you know that SI Open Accelerator series, it runs for about 6 weeks, and we are done with our first event. Today we find ourselves in the week 2, and we are doing systems innovation methods and tools. Just down below, we find the resources that we will use for today's event. Systems Innovation Toolkit and Systems Innovation Canvas. I will share the links with you later in the chat after I'm done with my presentation. So the event design is quite simple. Like in every SI Open Accelerator series, the presentation will have 3 main sections. The first section is for understanding the different methods. The second section is understanding tools. And the third one will give you a case study overview of how you can apply these methods and tools and how somebody has applied this in real time. So after every section, we have a small box for interaction. So after first section and second section, I see somebody's already moving a lot of things on the board. I will lock it down later. So so after first and second section, we have these small boxes for interaction. And right below, we have one section for posting questions. So you can drop in your questions along the presentation when Joss is making, or otherwise you can also drop in the chat and I will put it here so we can address as we go along. The main part of this event is this workshop, which will run for about 60 minutes. It has 4 sections each. We will learn more about what we will do in this workshop a little later into this event. And we have a plenary and there is an outro. So this is how the event is designed. And I hope you all have as much fun going through the event as we had designing it. So to get you all started, we have a small icebreaker question, which is more of a thinking impulse question. So I will bring all of you to me. So you're on the right part of the board. So the question here is quite simple. If you had only one adjective to describe complexity, what would it be? So take a sticky and then you can drop your adjective there. Whilst you're doing that, I would like to make a small announcement. It's that next week onwards, for every Accelerator series event that's happening on Wednesday, it will happen at 5 p.m. CET or 4 p.m. UK time. Today, there was a confusion or a small hiccup on the network. So I hope that's okay with all of you. And I hope you have it all put in your calendar so we can all enjoy this series together. I think we got really creative with different adjectives we can use to describe complexity. So just maybe we can pick a few for the next of our workshops to describe them
Yeah,
as well.
naughty and reality, wicked, intriguing, entangled. Yeah, these are great ones. Life itself and fun, great creativity, possibilities, relationships, relational.
I see
Okay.
balance and seeking.
Someone was asking about the recording. So this is live streaming to our YouTube channel, and then it's left for recording there. So maybe Ezra, afterwards, you could find our YouTube channel and share it into the chat for anyone who wants to find it afterwards.
Okay, I will do that. Thanks.
Non-linear connections. Quilumbo. Okay. What's Quilumbo, Jose? Challenging.
Hello, Josh.
Yeah.
It's an Argentine argot word that
Mm,
means uh, difficult, chaos.
okay.
Oh, wow.
Lovely. Okay, all the way from Argentina, we've got Quilumbo. Alrighty. So interconnected, lots of relational connections and so forth. The gap. And you want to tell us about the gap? What do you think this one is? Here?
Yeah, I think the in-betweens, not the point to make something, but between the 2 points, the gap, there's the complexity.
Yeah, in English we also have the word liminal or liminal space, which means in between things, which is
Yeah.
often used in the context of complexity. Alrighty, so let's maybe jump in then, shall I, Ezra?
Yeah, thanks, Jess.
Great. So yeah, quite a bit of workshopping today that are going to give a short presentation before we get there, kind of building upon what we covered last week for those who weren't there, a little bit of a recapping. But today we're definitely trying to cover again an overview of the overall method, the different dimensions, and the different tools in that. And in the coming weeks, we'll then be zooming into different aspects of that. So kind of bigger picture stuff today, and the workshop will be an overview of the different dimensions. We'll talk more about that when we get there, but let's take a look here. We started off last week sharing a bit about what systems innovation is, and many places to start that conversation. These wicked problems is one of them, one place. And this differentiation between simpler and complicated and very complex challenges. And we find ourselves in a world of complex systems and complexity, and they're creating a lot of wicked challenges for us, wicked problems. And we hear a lot about them all the time in the news and so forth. Organized crime, international crime, obesity, global cybersecurity, climate change, AI alignment, as they call it, multicultural integration, global inequalities, political paralysis. There's many of them. And not just are there many wicked challenges, we also find ourselves with a certain capacity gap coming out of the industrial age where we're not really set up for these kinds of wicked challenges. And so that's a little bit the story there. These wicked problems, they have multidimensional, so they're economic, political, social, environmental, they're all kind of entangled, as we saw there when we talked about complexity. They involve many factors and actors that are interrelated and interdependent and dynamic and evolving and constantly adapting and changing. And importantly, they involve all these actors. It's never one actor who's in control of it, like building a house or running a supermarket. We talk about, trying to get global governance working. Well, it's all these different agencies, and they have different perspectives and incentives and power dynamics, and there's all sorts of challenges there. And we're not very well equipped for these sorts of challenges. So there's a certain capacity gap, and of course we have methods and approaches for addressing challenges. We've been doing that since the beginnings of civilization and before. But a lot of those are quite linear, particularly the ones we developed during the industrial age. We kind of scaled our approaches to addressing challenges and organizing at a broader scale, but we ended up with a lot of bureaucratic, reductionist, hierarchical, kind of siloed systems, a lot of projects and management and planning and so forth that works well in some contexts. When you're trying to build a skyscraper or a high-speed train network, it doesn't work so well in other contexts. We have also developed, a whole approach to innovation, but it's more focused at products and services. And we're asking, is there this space up here on the top right to really try and build that capacity for addressing wicked challenges, which is both innovation approaches in terms of adaptive and iterative and experimental and creative, but it's also at the systems level. It's not just more products and services, it's more looking more broadly across systems and the kind of challenges we have there, and asking if we can start to address those ones more effectively. Call that systems innovation. It differs from innovation as usual or business as usual, or a lot of how we try and go about changing systems at a larger scale, which might be, industrial policy and public policy and all of this, which works to some extent, but definitely isn't getting us to where we want to go when it comes to some of these challenges like climate change and many others. So we looked at this last time, new kind of innovation, a systems innovation, and differs from reductionist innovation, which narrows down. It's based on technical expertise, often people in labs staring down microscopes and coming up with really fancy new materials or technologies and bring those out to market and makes our lives a bit better, but we still end up in the same systems. So can we take a different approach to innovation, one that incorporates systems thinking, so you have more broad awareness around systems and better understanding, and then a capacity to kind of collaborate within networks to work better around challenges or find better ways to work together around challenges. And that's the sort of innovation we're talking about here, systems innovation, and it requires a few things, definitely awareness, a growing awareness around systems and complex adaptive systems and how they work, because a lot of our thinking is still stuck in the industrial age of reductionism, and that needs to transform and evolve for us to build a new awareness around complex systems so that we can find better ways to work with them. A lot of the features and aspects of complex systems are quite counterintuitive. So if we don't change our thinking, we're really going to miss out on how they're actually working. We won't be able to work with them. We'll be working against them. This idea of non-linearity, as someone put back down there in the sticky, we really struggle with that idea. The exponential thing. We keep on thinking in linear ways, don't we, about the future, and then suddenly something grows and we get these transformations and we're all surprised. So that's one example of how we need to change our thinking. There are many others to understand complex systems, and from that have a basis to start working with them. We also need to understand, systemic structures. Instead of always focusing on parts and building our knowledge and analytical capacity around parts, we need to understand networks and systemic structures and how whole systems start interrelating, we need a more transformative kind of change and an understanding of transitions and an ability to design for transitions. And we need an approach that's co-created. Because of all these stakeholders, because of all these actors, no one organization can make this happen. We need to figure out ways to build ecosystems and platforms that enable multiple parties to work and collaborate and co-create around challenges over a prolonged period of time, because that's how we address and change systems. So those are some of the things that kind of we need and make for a systems innovation. And they're kind of challenges you encounter as you go about doing this work. Talk a bit more about them in a second. And we need approaches that kind of respond to that. So we were looking last week at this approach to changing systems that involves framing, thinking systemically about the challenge. I'm going to go more into this in a minute, just trying to give you this overview here, mapping out the factors and actors, transition design, designing new innovations at those intervention points, those leverage points, and interconnecting and enabling them to work together and grow an ecosystem, a new system over time. And that's the kind of approach we're exploring throughout the series. And in the coming 4 sections, we'll be kind of jumping into each of these in more depth. It's building upon the toolkit that we have at SI, which has lots of kind of sub-modules and canvases to help us with all of that. I'm not going to overwhelm you with all of these tools and canvases. We're going to say a bit more at the high level, but if you go onto the website, you'll find all of these would help you with more kind of specific aspects of this. So yeah, any questions so far before I move on?
And I don't see any in the chat or on the
I have a question.
Yep.
Thank you.
Since the last course session that I was on, I came away and said, I don't believe that systems thinking is the entire kind of solution in this new era. So I went on to OpenAI's cloud platform, and I said, what's the difference between reductionism, systems thinking, and realism? And actually, your recent explanation has just summed up that it's a multiple, multi-model kind of approach. And that because my challenge was, if reductionism has been in place for over 400 years, it's ingrained in our DNA. So when we start to think about change to something new, that's much harder than I originally appreciated that it would be to take on something like this around this scale of change. So I suppose my question is, where do you start to kind of, build those building blocks between understanding when to use reductionism, when to use realism, and how systems innovation acts as that umbrella to kind of help with that transition?
Yeah, great questions. Pare, is it? I pronounce it? Yeah, okay. You're kind of jumping in as we're going into the tools and methods. Those questions are a lot more in the learning ideas and so forth in our learning series. So
okay,
as we learn about systems thinking, we do learn that it's not just about holism. It's actually about a balance between reductionism and holism, because a system, when we say a whole, is a set of parts and an entirety. So you need to understand the entirety of the network and the parts. Reductionism helps us understand the parts. Holism helps us understand the network, interrelationships, and the whole system. So it's really an argument for both, because we do need both. So we're not throwing reductionism out. We're not saying it's all wrong. We're saying we need to build upon it because it's got us to where we are and it's great and everything. But we know there's a lot missing here, isn't there? We get all these silos, and actually we need something horizontal, a network connecting, integrating them, right? So we're saying, great, we got here, but we can't stay on doing this reductionism forever. It's an incomplete account of the world. We need a more holistic network to integrate a way of looking at the world and working together. So it's not arguing one against the other. It's actually trying to build upon it in a complementary way.
No, thank you.
Sure. Alrighty, any other quick questions before we move on?
I had one question where everybody could interact. Well, we also have one comment, I think, from Lucian. saying taking complexity seriously means we can't reduce a whole to parts, but we may take systems approach to be less reductionist than traditional approaches.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
We still need all the parts. We can't throw those out. That's one of the problems sometimes with systems thinking. You think, oh, it's all holistic and everything, but if you want a system that's working, it needs to be great parts and great parts working together in the right way, and then you get an amazing system. So as systems innovators, we shouldn't forget that. We need both of them. Yeah, but sometimes we focus too much on the parts, and we need to look in a more networked and holistic way to really complement that. Alrighty. Is there a way to access the Mirrorbot?
I just shared the link on the chat. Sorry about that.
All right, let's dig on then. Welcome all your questions. You can put them in here in this little place.
Just down below.
Just there. Okay. So yeah, trying to zoom in, trying to think about these different sections again and how they fit together. One way of approaching this, and hopefully the way you are approaching it, is that you actually have a challenge yourself, right? Instead of learning this in a theoretical way, you're coming in and you're saying, actually, I want to change this system. I want to change the way we do education here. I want to change the way, the energy system works in our country or financial system or whatever it is. And you maybe have already worked through that challenge a bit and thought about it. Maybe you've been doing it for years and you've already bumped up against the kind of challenges and issues you face when you try to do that. And hopefully you're coming from that place, and then this is going to, speak to you a lot more and make a lot more sense. So pose some of the questions here. It's the kind of challenges we're going to face as we go into this. If you try to work with a group of people for them to take a systems innovation approach, one of the first problems you're going to have is that they're probably thinking in a linear kind of reductionist way, and they may not even be conscious of that, right? So you actually have to help them think differently about this challenge. If you take homelessness here in London, there's lots of non-for-profits and so forth trying to address that. And typically what they're doing, how they're thinking about it, is there's people homeless on the streets, so we need more houses. And that's a kind of cause and effect thing. There's not enough houses or places for them. So if we had more homes, then that would solve the situation. That's a cause and effect way of kind of looking at the situation. But complex systems aren't like that. These things emerge out of multiple factors. So you actually have to help people shift their thinking away from that cause and effect and help them step back and say, there's a bigger system here, right? These people on the street, not just because of lack of houses, they're on the street for probably multiple different reasons, family issues and substance abuse and economic issues, but also broader systems in society. Why does housing cost so much in London that people can't afford it? All of this. So there's a broader systemic factors within which these people find themselves. So we've actually got to help people step back and look at that bigger picture and say there's more to it than just, building more houses. Or, the case of hunger and starvation in Africa, we think, okay, just give them food, right? And that'll solve the situation. They find themselves in probably war zones and all sorts of corruption in their political systems and all sorts of inequalities. And we need to look at that if we're really going to address the issue. So the system thinking helps us step back and say, what's the system we're part of here? And how's that thing working? And let's just start from there instead of this cause and effect stuff. And that's why we do all this kind of trying to help them to reframe it, create a new narrative around this challenge. And there's quite a bit of work to be done there. How can we help them think more holistically? How can we help them think in emergence instead of cause and effect? How can we look at relationships and see this as embedded within a network? How can we understand it as a complex adaptive system? And how can we help them look beneath the surface, keep on asking why, instead of just the outcome of homeless people, but ask why. What's the system underneath that? What are the systemic structures? What's the mental models and all of this? And this section is often about a lot to do with unpacking mental models, helping people understand their mental models and paradigms that's holding them in a particular way of looking at that situation and a way of approaching it, and shift that to a different paradigm, a systems thinking paradigm, which can actually unlock huge potential. And all systems innovation should start from there, really, although it can be challenging. So the second piece is this understanding the system. And you're going to kind of encounter that problem. How can we better understand the system and the key factors, relationships, and places to intervene? Not just you, but probably a group of people who need to work together on this. And that's why we do the systems mapping. This is why we do the systems thinking, to get a new space to innovate from, a new perspective to innovate from, a more holistic one. This is why we do the systems mapping, because we've actually got to understand the system, and we've got to find these intervention points. And often we're doing it in a participatory way, hosting convenings and workshops for people to do this together and find those intervention points, make sense of the system together, and so forth. Some of the key challenges you have here are around, mapping this out, understanding the key actors, stakeholder analysis, finding your intervention points, figuring out if they're actually high leverage or are they low leverage, not going to go anywhere. Are they viable? Can we actually do these things? So on and so forth. So, as mentioned, we have all these tools up here to help us with all of those, right? These ones are helping people, think differently about the challenge. These ones help them map it out and find those intervention points, think about stakeholders, all different things there. And then this here is about growing. So we've thought systemically about the challenge. We've started to understand the factors and actors. We've found our intervention points. So this is what we're going to be covering in the next 4 weeks, right? So next week, we'll be doing systems thinking, the week after the mapping, so on and so forth. Today, we're just trying to get an integrated view of the whole thing so it fits together for you. Right, we found these intervention points. What now? Well, we want to try and design and develop new initiatives at those intervention points so that we can start to change the dynamic there. We call this transition design. You could call it something else, but there's a question of, well, what's business as usual? What's the incumbent there? And how can we actually design new initiatives? And sometimes you need to design them. Sometimes they exist and you just need to nurture and develop them, incubate them so that they can become more prominent. But ultimately, it's trying to develop what we call the pockets of the future, which are initiatives that are representative of the new system we want to see in the world. And finally, how do we interconnect and integrate those into a coherent ecosystem that's going to work together, co-learn and co-create around this challenge over time to start to create and grow a new system and make the transition away from the old one? And that's how we approach all of this at SI. Rarely when we go to do initiatives and work with people do we actually do the whole process. Normally they want parts or modules and bits and pieces, and it's rarely linear and so forth, right? So make it look simple like that. Rarely is it. But it's nice to have a bit of a schema and think about what goes where, and then you've got your building blocks and you can bring them in as you see relevant and fit. So we try to teach people not a 4-step process, but to be like carpenters in terms of understanding the house they're trying to build, understanding the tools available to them, and then having the awareness and ability to use the right tool at the right place in the right way. And not just think there's an algorithm that's going to kind of fix everything, a 4-step process, but it helps to structure our thinking. So we're going to be jumping into this now in the workshop in a minute. It's the 4 stages we'll be looking at around our challenge we had from last week. Any questions on this? We'll be revisiting each one as we go through in the week coming. We also have the toolkit here, which kind of walks you through that and has the main canvases. I'll go into an example in a minute, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask those.
I don't see any in the chat or on the mail board.
Okay, everybody happy so far? Is this all making sense? 1 to 10, how does this make sense to you? 10 is I'm getting it, it makes a lot of sense. 0 is this makes 0 sense to me. I am totally confused. Okay, that's good. 9, great. Do you think, is it fitting together for you? Like those different areas? You know, I'm emphasizing this because I think in past sessions, people, workshops and so forth, people came away with a lot of parts, but they didn't really see the bigger picture. So I'm trying to help you grasp that. And it's been a long time in the making for us to try and think about how these fit together. And again, it's not a linear thing. We need to adapt it depending on the situation. Who is this way of working for? It's for anyone who wants to address a wicked complex challenge through systems innovation. Can be NGOs, can be government, can be whoever. Okay, great stuff. The coherence is amazing. Thank you, Tobias. Okay, so this is what we're going to be looking at today. I'm going to walk through a little example down here. We like to ground these sessions in examples, but I'll just to kind of show you, it's Azra's going to help us understand the workshop today, but I just want to kind of match it so that you get, you see how they fit together quickly. So in the center, we're going to be talking about the framing. How can we think about this challenge in a holistic way? We're bringing in our challenge from last week around education, as we'll explain all that. Then in the second section, we're going to map out the factors and actors around that, as we just talked about. Here, we're going to think about the intervention points and, you know, what do we design and develop? What are the things we need to grow there? And then finally, what's the supporting platform that's going to help us develop and grow this ecosystem over time? So this is one of our simplest, it is our simplest kind of ideation canvas that puts it all together. Obviously, this kind of process would normally be a much longer, more modular, more in-depth if you're doing this in the real world, but that's just an ideation canvas that's going to help us think about how it fits together. Okay. So down here is an example we have from Glasgow. Just going to take a sip of water. So this is surrounding violent crime in the city of Glasgow, which historically has had a big challenge with this for almost a century, actually. Glasgow in Scotland has had a reputation for violent crime, one of the most violent in Europe. Scores of young men died from knife wounds, and there's been little progress on this challenge in many decades, until quite recently. So in 2005, senior police officer McCluskey and the Glasgow police set up a violence reduction unit. There were many steps in the journey, which the unit changing this dynamic, but they started with reframing the challenge to see it in a different way. So I think we're familiar with, you know, the reductionist linear kind of way we think about crime and how to address that challenge. It's seeing individuals, people, as the problems, and we should fix those problems by arresting them and prosecuting them, punishing them, and putting them into jail. And the idea is we can fix the problem like that. So the criminal justice system treated each crime as an act of an individual, particularly young men in Glasgow City, in gangs also. So McCluskey took a different approach to this. She'd actually been trained as a nurse. So she looked at this challenge more in a networked kind of way, more like a pandemic or an epidemic that needed addressing like a public health emergency. So rather than responding to instances once they happen, the city needs to prevent the spread of violence in the first place. So we're a little bit familiar with this idea from the pandemic about the spreading of viruses and how we address that. But she was looking at this in a new way. From this perspective, the epidemic was the product of a shared culture of men and communities entrenched by economic inequality and by domestic violence, drugs, and worklessness. The shift in perspective to see Glasgow's challenge as a disease of epidemic proportions enabled McCluskey to show that the problem was deep-rooted, would only be addressed with a collective and systemic response. She had to change the city's culture, and to do it not from within the police force alone. They formed a network with many partners in health, education, housing, employment, family support services, as well as local churches, businesses, and community groups. So you can see the ecosystem concept there. You can see a reframing of the challenge. You can see this looking outside the box. So a reductionist approach narrows our vision down to what exists and looking inside the box. This here looks outside it. And when you see it in this new way as existing within a context and spreading or existing within a social network and the dynamics within that social network, reinforcing it and sustaining it, then you also see there are many other actors in that social network. And you thus need to work with them in a coherent and sustained and collaborative fashion over a prolonged period of time. And that gets us to the ecosystem concept. Together, they created a more effective way to intervene early, working with families to prevent young men being drawn into a culture of violence, and then to preventing them with more attractive, and then providing them with more attractive alternatives, education, training, and employment. It was a very successful initiative, actually. It's been replicated here in London. There's a London Violence Reduction Unit now, and maybe other parts of the country. But yeah, within a decade or so, Glasgow got named European City of Culture, and so there's been a huge reduction in violence as a consequence of this. And this illustrates a few things. They shifted from a linear approach to directly tackling the problem to a non-linear approach that was working with the surrounding set of factors to change the context within which these young people found themselves. Over time, this led to the emergence of a new context and new outcomes. As you saw, it involved a change in thinking. They changed the way people were thinking about the issue to a more holistic one that shifted the focus up from the individuals to the system and the overall context, which is what systems thinking is about. You probably still need the police officers locking people up in certain situations, but going back to our conversations earlier, this was building upon that and complementing that to provide the supporting context that would reduce the amount of emergence of young people engaging in violent crime. So that's just a short one. You can look into that. There's more references to it on the internet. Maybe I'll find you a link later if you want to dig further into that. It's quite an interesting case study. We'll be looking at more case studies as we go through in the coming weeks. This is one of the most interesting ones because of its kind of results. And we can see quite clearly some of the key aspects we're trying to highlight here, right? Change in thinking, a non-linear approach, working with context, shifting away from reductionism that focuses on the parts, the individuals, and locking them up, to this ecosystem, looking outside the box, this ecosystem approach, having to work with multiple actors, and ultimately the results here. So it's an interesting one. Any questions on this one before we move forward? I will grab a link afterwards actually and share in the chat so you can read more.
We do have a question in the chat from Katwiri.
Yeah, feel free to read it out, whoever it was. Okay, as most industries are driven by capital, That is why, presumably, changing systems is deemed not a priority or still unattainable. How can we use this systems thinking framework to reimagine stakeholders' buy-in while still displaying capital investment? Yeah, good question. Maybe a little bit a broader kind of conversation than here now, or a bigger conversation. We actually have a lab coming up about investing for systems change in a few weeks. You might like to join, but we're going to be exploring that very challenge over a series of three workshops, investing for systems change and all those kinds of challenges. So I might hold it for the moment. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, hopefully that gave you a little glimpse. I know it doesn't fully, illustrate all the aspects of what I was talking about. We will be exploring other examples that will illustrate better other aspects of all of this, but hopefully it touched upon some of them. And I'm going to hand over to Azra. Hopefully you're starting to get a picture of the overall method here. And the canvas is going to build upon that. The canvas is just an exercise, right? So take it as a tool to help you, an exercise to help you start thinking about these different dimensions and how they fit together. In the coming weeks, we'll be, going in more depth into them.
Okay, thank you, Cho. So I brought all of you to me on the Miro board, so we know we're all aligned here. So we are taking the challenge that we voted on last time in our last event on last Wednesday. So the challenge that we are taking forward is how might we transform education systems to meet the needs of society in the 21st century. So we're going to take this challenge and go through the different circles in this canvas here. As you see on the screen, there are 3 concentric circles. So at the center is where we will begin, which is framing. And these circles actually, they align with 4 dimensions of systems innovation that we just went through in detail. So in the first circle, which is framing, you have 2 sections. First is on the right side, parts view, and the left side, holistic perspective. So it's quite simple. You need to take a sticky or grab your thoughts around how it looks, what it feels like to look at this system, the challenge that we are dealing with in parts view, and then you would do the same for the holistic view later. So down below in the yellow sticky there, you also have the instructions that you need to follow for this concentric circle and a prompt to guide you. So after you're done putting stickies for both the boxes, you will take some time to discuss amongst the other participants in that group. Then you move to the immediate outer circle, which is mapping the system. If you see, there are 4 different sections, each catering different factors. So you will put up stickies which align with the challenge, different factors that you think are still influencing the way in which the system continues to persist. So you grab a sticky and you put it around whichever sector you think it's relevant. You can also put actors. Maybe you can choose to do it in a different color there. For an easy way of doing this, I have put up some examples for us to follow. And also same, we have an yellow sticky here, which will help us with instructions of what to do in this circle, and also a prompt so we can keep ourselves on track with what we need to do here. After we're done with the mapping, we move out to the immediate outermost circle, which is changing, relating to the factors that you've put around 4 sections. You can choose to put up ideas around what are the key places where you can intervene with the system and change it, and what kind of innovation needs to come into place so this intervention can happen. So you put it across different factors that you have multiplied across the sections there. So for example, here for technology, I put a factor called digital accessibility is limited at times, which is so the intervention point that I put around is expanding this accessibility to reliable digital infrastructure for all students. And then after we are done with it, we move to the outermost circle, which is growing the ecosystem, which is really about building this change that we want to see in the world in terms of this challenge that we are dealing. We put our thoughts here on this box, which is platform. So for this one, I put raise awareness with campaigns. You can use the sticky to follow the instructions and to see how you can go through different circles there. There are about 4 sections, so each section is for about 15 minutes. I will run the timer, so you are all in different breakout rooms. Maybe you can follow the timer and then discuss and decide the timings accordingly for all of you. After we had
Do you have some examples in center there you might share us about that first one?
Yeah, so I did put these yellow stickies for us to go through these examples. So for the first one, the parts view, this is still relating to the challenge that we have there, which is how can we develop an education system that is more aligned to the current century, 21st century here. Maybe, Joss, would you like to put it at the center for us?
Sure, just unlock so we can put that down there. So that's a challenge statement, and then we start off in the center, and we're trying to reframe it by think more holistically about it. So first, in the parts view post up, what does it look like from a reductionist challenge perspective, education systems, and then what does it look like from a more holistic perspective? You'll see all the text explaining that. We're doing that about 15 minutes, then we're moving on to the mapping for about 15 minutes for each section. It'd be great when you go into your breakout rooms to have someone as to lead the facilitate to some extent, kind of keep you on track and move forwards, and then maybe share back with us at the end. We'll have the challenge statement up there for each of the boards. Okay, how's that, Ezra? Are we ready or?
Yeah, we are. I'm just putting them at the center so it doesn't get lost.
So just to be clear, when we go into the breakout rooms, we're asking both questions, or the first question we come back and then second question?
We'll stay in the breakout rooms for about 45 minutes, Zahid, not to kind of create too much disruption coming back and forth. So yeah, there's a certain amount of self-organizing here, people. Hopefully you'll be able to lead yourselves. We've got the stickies there to instruct you, and then we'll have the timer. You'll see it on the board, 15 minutes for each section, just if you could stay moving through, and you're welcome to have a conversation as you go along.
I will run the timer for each section so we all can keep ourselves on track with the time and follow through all the 4 parts. And
so we just need to give a number to these different rooms that we have. So yeah, we'll put you in breakout rooms. There'll be 5 of those automatically assigned. If you're number 1, then please go to room 1 and so on. Should you do that now, Ezra? Or?
yeah, I just created all the rooms for us. You can join the corresponding room and then also go there and be on that frame which says room number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Great, we'll see you back in about 45 minutes. Please keep track of the timer on the board and have a facilitator, and we're looking forward to hearing from you at the end. If you have any problems with breakout rooms, just let us know. Have you automatically assigned, Ezra, or? Yeah, okay.
I will wait a minute before I run the timer, I think. Okay, I think I can run the timer.
Anybody need help here finding their room? Ty, David, Thomas, Abby?
I think most of them are also from the room too. Should I move them to
Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, all of them are now.